It started like any other day in our perfectly manicured suburb, a morning of chirping birds, freshly cut grass, and a sense of order that made you believe nothing could ever disrupt this picture-perfect scene. I was out in my yard, enjoying the familiar rhythm of tending to my flower beds and ensuring every blade of grass was in its proper place, when something strange caught my eye. Half buried beneath the well-tended soil was a sleek, modern cable that glimmered faintly in the sunlight. At first, I thought it was a piece of discarded tech or an odd artifact from a neighbor's renovation. But as I dug a little deeper, I realized this wasn't ordinary trash. It was a high-tech fiber optic line deliberately laid across my property. The sight of that futuristic cable running right through my yard, in sharp contrast to the vintage charm of our suburban landscape, sent a chill down my spine. My pristine sanctuary, once a symbol of order and pride, had been invaded by something alien, something imposed without a word of consent. I couldn't help but wonder, who had the nerve to dig up my yard and bury this modern contraption? And more importantly, why? As the morning sun climbed higher, my thoughts swirled with a mix of anger, confusion, and a spark of rebellion. I'd always prided myself on my property, on every inch of it being truly mine, free from arbitrary intrusions and half-baked HOA schemes. Today, that personal haven had been violated in the most bizarre way imaginable. And so, as I stood there with dirt on my hands and a growing determination in my heart, I knew that this was the day everything would change. My quiet, orderly life was about to take a dramatic turn, a turn that would lead me to reclaim my yard, piece by piece, and send a clear message to anyone who thought they could impose their modern madness on my turf. I grabbed my gardening gloves and a small shovel, determined to investigate this oddity. As I carefully started to dig around the mysterious cable, my heart pounded with a mix of curiosity and indignation. The soil was unexpectedly soft, almost as if it had been disturbed recently, revealing a sleek, modern fiber optic line buried just below the surface. The cable glowed faintly, reflecting the morning light in an almost otherworldly way. Its smooth metallic surface was in stark contrast to the rough, familiar texture of the earth around it. I couldn't help but wonder, was this a part of some high-tech experiment, or worse, a blatant intrusion on my property? I knelt down and brushed off the dirt with my hand, my eyes widening as I took in the details. There was no sign of any warning tape or official markings, just the cold, clinical material of the cable that didn't belong in a neighborhood defined by tradition and order. It was as if someone had deliberately run this line right across my yard without a single word of explanation. As I stood up, a surge of anger and resolve washed over me. I realized that this wasn't merely a misplacement. It was an imposition, a disruption of my home's sanctity by an unseen force. The discovery of that glowing line marked the first concrete sign that I was about to embark on a journey to reclaim my space. Not long after my discovery, I received a crisp envelope from the HOA. With a sigh, I tore it open, expecting some bureaucratic excuse for the intrusion. The letter was written in that impersonal, corporate tone that managed to sound both vague and condescending. It claimed that the fiber optic line was part of a neighborhood modernization initiative designed to bring next-generation connectivity to every household. They insisted it was a beneficial upgrade meant to future-proof our community, something about seamless integration with smart home systems and enhanced digital infrastructure. But here's the kicker, the letter provided no details whatsoever. No maps, no dates, no information on how my permission was supposedly secured. It was as if they had pulled a policy out of thin air and expected us all to nod and smile. I flipped through the document again, searching for a clause that might justify the unauthorized installation, but all I found were buzzwords and empty assurances. Reading those words, my frustration only deepened. How could they bury a high-tech cable across my yard without ever consulting me? It was a clear, blatant disregard for my property rights and my right to know what was happening on my own land. I folded the letter with a mix of anger and determination. The HOA's so-called modernization initiative was nothing more than a flimsy excuse, a way to justify their unilateral decision without having to face the consequences of ignoring the community's voice. And that was the final straw. Fueled by anger and the undeniable violation of my property, I decided it was time to confront the HOA head-on. I marched over to their office, an imposing building with cold, sterile corridors, and demanded a meeting with someone who could explain this absurdity. Inside, I was met with smirks and evasive answers. I laid out my evidence: the fiber optic line in my yard, the nonsensical letter filled with empty promises, and my unwavering determination to reclaim my space. I asked pointed questions. Who authorized this installation? Why was I never consulted? What exactly is this modernization initiative supposed to achieve? The responses I got were vague and dismissive, filled with bureaucratic jargon that only deepened my frustration. Every answer felt like a rehearsed line meant to placate without providing any real substance. That's when I knew enough was enough. I made it crystal clear that I wouldn't stand by while my property was used as a testing ground for their unilateral decisions. I demanded not only answers but accountability, a public acknowledgement of their overreach, and a commitment to rectify the situation. In that tense moment, I realized I wasn't just defending my yard. I was challenging a system that thought it could impose changes without our consent. And I vowed right then that I'd do whatever it took to send a clear message. My property, my rules. After the futile meeting with the HOA, filled with vague promises and corporate jargon, I reached a breaking point. The official explanations were nothing but smoke and mirrors, and my property rights had been trampled without so much as a courtesy call. I knew that waiting for them to fix their mistake wasn't going to happen. With a determined heart and a mind made up, I decided that the only way to reclaim my yard was to take matters into my own hands, literally. I returned home, grabbed my trusted shovel and a few other gardening tools, and set out to confront the tangible symbol of their overreach, that sleek, invasive fiber optic cable running across my once pristine lawn. As I dug around the cable, every clump of soil that fell away felt like a small victory, a reclamation of my space, and a strike against the oppressive modernization initiative that had been foisted upon us. The physical effort was grueling, and the earth was stubborn, but with each shovelful, my resolve grew stronger. This wasn't just about a cable, it was about sending a message that I wouldn't let the HOA dictate what happened on my property without my consent. The act of digging wasn't just an act of defiance. It was a declaration of independence. I disconnected the cable carefully, ensuring that every inch of its connection was severed, as if cutting ties with an unwanted intruder. My actions were deliberate, and every scoop of dirt was a reminder that I had a voice, and I was ready to use it. I stood back, looking at the exposed cable lying on the freshly dug ground, a symbol of resistance. I knew that what I had done would ruffle feathers, but it was also the spark for change that our community so desperately needed. With the decision made and my resolve steeled, I dove into the physical act of defiance. I spent hours in the heat, armed with my trusty shovel and an iron determination to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Every scoop of dirt was like chipping away at the overreach of bureaucracy. The fiber optic cable, a symbol of invasive modernization, lay entangled beneath layers of earth. I worked meticulously, ensuring I disconnected every link with care. Each severed connection was a victory against a system that believed it could impose its will on my property without my say-so. As the cable slowly emerged from the ground, so did my sense of empowerment. Neighbors passing by would pause, curiosity piqued by the sight of a man transforming his yard into a battleground of reclamation. Some offered supportive nods. Others even cheered me on, their eyes reflecting a shared longing for autonomy. In that moment, as I laid the severed cable on the grass, tangible symbol of defiance, I knew I was not just digging up a line. I was digging up the future. The future of a community where every homeowner had a voice, and where even the smallest act of resistance could spark a revolution. As I stood there, cable severed and dirt still clinging to my hands, the murmur of neighbors began to swell into a chorus of disbelief and support. It wasn't long before people started gathering along the sidewalk, peering over fences with a mix of awe and indignation. Mrs. Jenkins from next door, who'd always been known for her perfectly pruned rose garden, came out first, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of the exposed fiber optic line and my determined stance. "I can't believe they do this without asking," she exclaimed, shaking her head. Others chimed in, Mr. Patel, who waved from his driveway, and a group of local kids who cheered and high-fived as they ran past me. The atmosphere was electric. Support and outrage melded together as people realized that this wasn't just about a stray cable. It was about every homeowner's right to control their own property. Phones were whipped out, and within minutes, photos and videos of the scene were making their way across social media, sparking an online firestorm. Hashtags like #YardRevolution and #MyPropertyMyRules began trending locally. For the first time in months, I saw a community united, not by compliance, but by a shared desire for autonomy. Their reaction wasn't just about cheering for my act of defiance. It was a collective statement that they wouldn't be pushed around by faceless bureaucracy. The impromptu gathering, full of whispered conversations and determined nods, set the stage for what was clearly turning into a grassroots movement. I looked around, feeling both humbled and emboldened by the support. The simple act of digging up that fiber optic cable had ignited something powerful, a beacon of resistance in a sea of conformity. And I knew that this was only the beginning. With my hands still stained with fresh dirt and my heart pounding with a mix of defiance and determination, I knew that physical action was only half the battle. The other half was making sure the HOA heard us loud and clear. That evening, I sat down at my kitchen table, the severed fiber optic cable, now a symbol of resistance, displayed proudly on my counter. I drafted a scathing yet witty letter addressed to the HOA board. In it, I laid out every grievance, the unauthorized installation, the breach of my property rights, and the callous disregard for homeowner input. Every line was meticulously crafted to cut through the bureaucracy with undeniable clarity and a touch of humor. I titled the letter simply "Re," as a nod to their earlier hollow communications, and attached photos and videos of the cable and the community rally. This wasn't just a complaint. It was a declaration. I sent it off via certified mail and posted it on our neighborhood's online forum, ensuring every resident would see it. The response was immediate. Emails and comments poured in from neighbors, some praising my courage, others demanding action, and a few even suggesting we form a collective to safeguard our properties. The letter quickly became a viral sensation in our small community, a rallying cry against overreach that forced the HOA to take notice. In that moment, I realized that words could be as powerful as any shovel or act of defiance. My "re" was not just a response. It was a beacon of accountability, echoing the collective will of a community that refused to be silenced. In the days that followed, the once silent, conformist hum of our neighborhood was replaced by a vibrant chorus of defiance and unity. The fiber optic cable, now fully disconnected and exposed, became a symbol of what one person's stand could achieve. Neighbors gathered in my yard, not just to marvel at the reclaimed space, but to celebrate a collective victory against unchecked authority. The HOA, faced with the undeniable evidence of our community's resolve, had no choice but to issue a reluctant apology. They promised a review of their policies and vowed never to impose such invasive projects without homeowner consent again. But the real change had already taken root in our hearts. Our online forum was abuzz with messages of empowerment, and hashtags like #MyPropertyMyRules and #YardRevolution were trending among local communities. My once quiet yard had transformed into a public canvas for creative expression. People began hosting impromptu gatherings, turning our block into a living, breathing testament to resistance. Flower beds and art installations flourished, each one a reminder that our spaces belong to us, free from the grip of bureaucratic overreach. As I looked over the newly invigorated community, neighbors sharing smiles, children playing, and the air filled with a newfound sense of possibility, I realized that this was more than just a personal victory. It was the birth of a movement that showed when homeowners come together, they can reclaim not only their lawns but their right to shape their own world. In that moment, as the sun dipped low over our revived neighborhood, I knew that our fight had sparked something far greater than a simple act of defiance. It had ignited a spirit of empowerment that would resonate far beyond my own front yard, a legacy of resistance, creativity, and community that could never be buried again.